All right, hello everybody. Today we're talking Blonde Redhead, a New York indie band started in the mid 90s, 1993, consisting of the singer Kazu Makino and the two Italian twins Simone and Amadeo Pace. Uh, Blonde Redhead's an interesting band. They started very much in the shoegaze, no wave kind of scene, and they released, I believe, 9 studio albums, varying in their genres and qualities and everything like that. And I just recently did a full listen through their discography, and I thought today we can do a little ranking and discussion of their albums. Their first album, self-titled Blonde Redhead, I'm definitely gonna have to throw in probably the A tier. This album was very enjoyable. Not exactly innovative or ahead of its time, but definitely just a quality kind of shoegazy, atmospheric, loud guitar-driven sound here. Lots of great songs, notably Astro Boy, Girl Boy. Those are some great tunes that I like to go back to from this album. Super just kind of enjoyable and not really pushing any boundaries here, but definitely worth a listen. Redhead's very unique, and at this point they haven't quite found their voice, but you can hear where they're going with it and the tones they're going to reach for in their subsequent albums. So overall, A tier, enjoyable listen, not mind-boggling, not game-changing, but definitely worthwhile and worth discussion. Let's see if I can say this right. La Mia Vita Violentia? I'm not sure. Uh, D tier. This album was hard to get through. Definitely, probably my least favorite album of their entire discography. It's kind of a bummer considering their first album was pretty solid. They stuck with a lot of the same sounds they had before, but they took a lot of the more abrasive, melodyless, atonal kind of qualities, which normally is not a bad thing. I don't think those things are necessarily negatives, but they didn't go anywhere with these kinds of qualities. That's really worth even discussing or going back to visit. It's kind of brash. There's not much to grab onto. The album just kind of flies by without leaving a very strong impression other than I'm bored. Can I get to the next album? At least that's how I felt listening to it. Critically, it's not very well reviewed. Um, yeah, definitely a D. Maybe a little in the high of a D tier, but not one I'm going to be revisiting. In Expression of the Expressionless, I believe it's called, released in 98. Is going to have to go probably B tier for me. This one is critically panned. This is probably their least popular album critically, except for maybe Penny Sparkle, which comes a couple years later. Um, I quite liked it actually, especially knowing where the next album is going. You could see them planting the seeds and hear their sound shifting in a more unique direction than where they've been previously with the last few albums. It's just been very inspired. And not super special to Blonde Redhead. They really start to find their voice in the next few albums. This one definitely is a little rough on the edges. There's not a ton to go back to here, but there's some tracks, longer. The tracks are longer here, more experiments with the instrumentation and the song structure, and you can hear them planting the seeds for what's coming next. And maybe because I'm a sucker for the next album is why I, didn't hate this one. But yeah, I think maybe a low B tier is a good place for this. So the next album, A Melody of Certain Damaged Lemons, A tier, almost S tier. Definitely my favorite Blonde Redhead album. If I'd never heard this, I wouldn't even have bothered to listen through their discography. So, as most clinically online people such as myself know, this album features the song For the Damaged Coda, which was featured in a Rick and Morty episode and thusly became a kind of a meme of its own. But the song really is a beautiful song and is a perfect period on the end of the album. This album is dark. It's experimental. It's got more structure than their previous albums, but there's definitely more things being said here. They're toying around with a lot of different styles on this album. Their guitar playing is different than before. Before it was very, just driven and not very riff based or melodical. It was just more of a kind of an overarching atmosphere was their guitar. And this one has riffs. It's got melodies. It's got interesting tones. There's all kinds of different instruments on this album. There's a lot being said lyrically. Definitely an enjoyable listen. Lots of songs to go back to. It's the one I revisit the most. Definitely. Um, yeah, fantastic. Melody of Certain Damaged Lemons. Definitely worth a listen. Their next album, Misery is a Butterfly. It's going to have to go probably B tier. This is their most beloved album. I think this is the album that really brought them any kind of fame or notoriety. It's got a couple of great songs on it. Elephant Woman is great. Misery is a Butterfly, another great song. This album, the only reason it's not higher on the list for me is it is kind of a lot to get through. It's definitely their darkest and their heaviest album, not in terms of heavy chugging guitar riffs, but more in terms of emotions. It came after about a 4-year break in between the last album and this album, where Makino, the vocalist, suffered a horse accident, and there's all kinds of imagery of the trauma she experienced from this accident sprinkled throughout the album that can really make it a bit of a depressing experience to listen to. Music is fantastic. There's a lot of experimentation, again, with the instruments on this one. Very heavy string arrangements, which is pretty cool. It was a little popular in that time in indie music to be using string ensembles, but it was very well fitted for this album, and very well done. Overall, B tier, definitely enjoyable, worth going back to listen to. Their next album, 23, is going to go top of the B tier for me. This is probably my second favorite album of theirs. It is a drastic contrast to Misery is a Butterfly. It's brighter, it's poppier, it's more electronic. They've ditched the strings and have replaced them with synths. It's a breath of fresh air after the darkness that was Misery is a Butterfly. Overall, I enjoyed this one a lot. There's a lot to go back to. The title track, 23, is absolutely fantastic. Driving, fast, great melodies. They've really found their melodic voice on this album, where that was something they struggled with before, was really coherent melodies. And now they finally found that, and there's lots to remember and stick with on this one. Very enjoyable, great album. Next up is Penny Sparkle, which is also probably D tier, unfortunately. This album, there's not even much to say about. It's just boring. It took the electronic sound of their last album and kind of dulled it down, took all the interesting parts away. There's less things to remember here. It ultimately wasn't bad in terms of production or overall quality. There was nothing to grab onto. It was forgettable. There was just not a lot said here that was, worth remembering. So overall, D tier. One good quality with it was they kind of set up some things with their next album that I actually quite enjoy. So let's go ahead and I'll put that one in the C tier. Baragon, I believe I believe that's how it's pronounced, was also critically not very well received, but I actually quite enjoyed. It's poppier, it's quieter, it's they're most experimental in terms of strong song structure. But overall, I enjoyed what they did. There's some great tunes to come back to. Cats on a Tin Roof is a great song. Penultimo is another great song. That's a bit of a throwback for them. Overall, not a lot to say with this one. It was enjoyable. There's some songs I'm definitely going to go back to from this one. I'm realizing now I forgot to throw in their third album, Fate Can Be Just As Good, which I'm going to have to put probably high B tier. It's solid. It's good. It's more of the shoegazy kind of stuff that we heard on the first album. Not my favorite in terms of individual songs. As an overall listening experience, there's definitely something to grab here, but more or less forgettable. It's good. It's not great. So that's why I'm leaving it at the top of the B tier. You know what? I want to put it at the high of the C tier. But yeah, so overall, this is the Blonde Redhead discography ranked. Thank you.